That Great Business Show. Winner, highly commended award. Irish Podcast Awards.
Welcome to episode 195 of That Great Business Show, home of great business tips, insights, and opportunities on every episode. We have a change of tempo for the next 3 episodes because we have found a man that many of you may not have heard of, but a man who has made it to the very, very top of the tree of the international auctioneering business. He was variously CEO and deputy chair at Bonham's, the privately owned international auction house that is one of the world's oldest and largest auctioneers of fine art and antiques. And go back a bit further, 20 years ago, he was hired by a then small company called eBay to bring a small auction house they had bought online. And that's just some of the CV. There is plenty more. On future episodes, we will be asking Paddy about secrets of the sales room. And also we want to know about some incredible sales he's been involved in, both the good and the bad. In business, controlling costs is essential. That includes your business fleet's fuel costs. Maxall, a family-owned business since 1920, are big supporters of That Great Business Show. Maxall fuel cards offer tailored solutions for transport fleets of all sizes, delivering efficient fuel cost management for your business at over 700 service stations nationwide. The Maxall dedicated fuel card team wants to hear from you at maxall.ie/fuel cards. Let us start with the backstory by saying, Paddy Meade, welcome to That Great Business Show.
Thank you, Conal.
I saw on your CV a most curious thing. You went to UCD and you studied Welsh. Now, the backstory is you're from Dublin, lived in Meath, studying Welsh.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Yeah, go figure. I used to do this talk when I was working in America on never worry about what you did as your undergraduate degree. For people, you too can have a successful career. And I had gone to school here. I'd gone to Ring, liked Irish. And when I started having done a pretty bad leaving cert, I got into arts in UCD. And I knew that I wanted to do archaeology. Given my career since, I didn't even know that I liked art history, go figure. And I was...
That must have been something scratching you. Like, I mean, you could have chosen lots of things, but why archaeology?
Well, archaeology, I love stuff and I still collect Roman and, I'm still fascinated by the Romans. And, my website for my business is named after a Roman general, Belisarius. And so I loved that, albeit that, as I found out in archaeology, the Romans never made it to Ireland. But I loved archaeology.
Walk out the door and say...
But I was in the Irish faculty and I didn't gel. And I walked down the hall and there was this professor sitting at his desk called Arwen Watkins. And he was like, come in. And I said, oh, hi. He said, we're starting a Welsh class here. And I'm not going to try to do a Welsh accent because people ask me, say something Welsh. And I go, I really can't remember any of it. They're, come on. I said, I really don't remember much of it, but I did sit it. I was a perseverer. So in my first year, I did philosophy, archaeology and Welsh. And then I had to drop one. I dropped philosophy. So there was 10 students in Welsh class in my first year. There was 3 in the second year. And then me, I came first in Welsh and last.
Because there was one man standing.
There was one man standing. So I persevered. I got the degree. And, it may not be a surprise, but the Welsh faculty didn't last that much longer after I left. But I did. Why did I do it? To this day, I don't know, but I enjoyed it.
But I love this whole thing of people saying, I should have done X or Y. This got no bearing on it. Longer term, you go and you find out what you really, really love. Well, now, one of the things that you did while you were doing archaeology, you went on digs down in Meath, am I right?
Yeah, I did.
And which ones? Any of the famous ones?
I think I did a little bit Nobber, which was being run by George Ogan, the professor at the time, which has never opened to the public and is an amazing tumulus near Newgrange as part of that whole Newgrange of Neolithic burial mounds. But I worked on a sort of an excavation in Trim, which was, I think, a Knights Hospitallers or the, what do you call them? The
Knights Templars.
Knights Templars, yeah. I think it was a Knights Templars place, and there were graves, and they were going to be building a road. So it was one of these you got to work quickly excavations. And I remember...
You mean the Templars weren't going to build the road? The Meath County Council was going to build the road with JCBs.
Indeed. The Templars had long gone. We were excavating there to try to just make sure that we could recover as much. But there was a graveyard within the confines of the abbey outside Trim. And I remember none of the locals who were working with us would kind of touch the graves. So, you know, the lads and ladies from UCD had to go into the graves. And I remember the first time, you know, came across a skeleton and they had a ring on it. And I had to take the ring off the finger and it said, "Wishing me well," like in Old English. I thought, oh my God, that's really
And
creepy.
did you hand it over or is it gone for auction?
Absolutely. The second dig was up in a lake dwelling, somewhere in Meath as well, in Old Castle. And that was a lake dwelling. And I remember I worked on a summer on that one. And I was working on sort of the fire pits of this lake dwelling. And I remember once finding a coprolite, and because I didn't know what a coprolite was, and I had to sort of measure out where I'd found it, its northings and westings and exactly where it located. And of course, I looked it up.
Sir, what is a coprolite?
It's a piece of poo.
Okay.
And so
you know
I was, you know, working with sort of a toothbrush and a trowel. And when I found something, you know, like a piece of poo, it was, you know, it was pretty radical because it could tell you what they were eating back then. But I didn't find that it kind of didn't have that Raiders of the Lost Ark feel about it. And pardon the pun, I found archaeology just a little bit too down to earth. And so
You went to Adams.
Yeah.
How did you find your way in? Again, like there was obviously something tickling you.
I have always been a collector, you know, and I still am.
As a kid, like you're talking about
Yeah.
What were you collecting when you were 10?
Well, I collect stickers, you know. I collected stamps. Like I remember the first word I learned in French was autocollant, which is a sticker. And I collected the weirdest stuff. I collected stamps, collected coins. Do you remember, this is weird, they had these triangles of cream on Aer Lingus flights.
I do.
I used to collect those until one time I opened one and then, you know, it was the smell. So I collected across the board.
You're right.
You
used the word weird. That is weird.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You heard it here first.
So you go into Adams.
I got to work as an intern in Adams back in the early 80s. And I was at college at the time.
And just in case anybody doesn't know what Adams we're talking about Adams on St. Stephen's Green.
St. Stephen's Green, James Adams.
Probably the top or one of the top auction houses.
Yeah. Oldest auction house right there beside the Shelburne. And I got to work there and I just thought it was the most amazing thing.
What were you doing?
Everything. Dog's body, helping out. But I'd actually go out on calls. There was an English guy who was a valuer and he sort of took me under his wing. He took me out. And I thought, God, you go into people's houses and you look at their stuff and you go into their bedrooms and you get to talk to them and see how people decorate and how they live. And I just thought it was the greatest thing. And he told me there was a course in England where you could go and actually, you know, do this as a career and learn all about these different things in people's houses and go and visit country houses and natural trust properties and learn. And I thought, sign me up.
So what happened next after that? You went and did the course? I
did. I left. At that stage, they were doing the degrees. You did your final degree in the summer. In July or August, I sat my finals in UCD. And in September, I started in Southampton, where I did the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and Incorporated Society of Valuers and Auctioneers exams and studies in fine arts and chattels.
And did you pass?
I did. I came first, in the country,
Because...
Yeah.
There was only one person doing it?
No, there was loads actually. And oddly enough, you know, because I did a pretty lousy leaving, but I remember the first year in university, I actually won a prize where I got cash back from UCD. Like I got a check. I came home to my dad and said, look, Dad, you know. And then I won money as well in...
For what?
I don't know. I got first place in something in archaeology in Welsh. Well,
if there's only one person standing.
Not in archaeology, there wasn't. And then when I got to England, I just loved this whole course. And again, I came first in the country. And I won a thing called the Reginald Tapping Prize for Fine Arts. And when I did my degree in
So you
England.
had found your métier.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No.
And what bits did you like most?
You know, the beauty of antiques and art is there's so many different areas. It's like a rabbit. You can go down to furniture, decorative arts, carpets, jewelry, and you can spend your entire life learning about each of those areas. So I was a generalist, which meant, you know, the minute I sort of got into this career, I was trying to cover all bases. So I needed to go into a house and be able to basically know enough about everything to be able to sort of not miss the good stuff, but also to be able to tell the bad stuff. A bit like you see on Antiques Roadshow. I had to be able to do that.
And on Antiques Roadshow, they are very gentle telling people that some of the stuff is tat, and they maybe try to temper their expectation when it's great.
Yeah.
You're good at that, are you?
I remember who knows, but I remember saying, your Singer sewing machine, madam, is so durable, and they were made with such expertise that of the 2.5 million that were made, at least 2.2 still survive. And you should hold on to this because it's an amazing piece of manufacturing acumen.
But in terms of value, it ain't going nowhere.
It ain't going nowhere. No. Hold on to it dearly.
And as people probably already can tell, you do have another gift.
What?
Gab. And was that the decider for you, that people obviously spotted you were good, obviously academically very good at the subject, but you can also talk. You can talk for old Ireland.
I think, so many jobs out there are about being able to engage with people. And, my first job out of Southampton was up in the kind of Oxford-Banbury area. So Cotswolds. And my job was to go out and literally meet people in their houses, see what they had, and try to get them to sell it. And then when it came in, make sure that it sold.
And were you flying solo? As in, did man bring you along and teach you, or are you now on your own?
Most of it was solo. But, I would go out initially for the first few weeks, but there was always people that you could run stuff by. But no, there was, oh my God, you're out there. And, as we're talking, there's all these stories are beginning to, come up about people I've met out there. And
you must have met Lord and Lady, this, that, and the other.
I met them all, yeah.
And were they all nice to you?
Yeah, but people, I was an Irishman in the middle of England.
In the 1980s.
In the 1980s. I have nothing but good to say about my time in the UK.
They obviously took to you.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So I worked there for a while. Then I went up to the kind of Nottingham, Doncaster, Southern Yorkshire, the place called the Dukeries, where they built all these sort of beautiful homes, but they're on top of coal mines, So and again, a lot of the cities get a bad rap in Northern England, but the countrysides outside those cities, like literally 10 miles, 5 miles, 2 miles, is absolutely stunning, like Derbyshire Dales and Yorkshire Moors. And so I was just roaming around in the car going and visiting, Lord and Lady Got Rocks, and little old ladies. And, I remember going into this guy's house and he, offered me a drink, and, I said yes. And he said, would you have a little whiskey? And he poured out his teeth out of the cup, and he put in the whiskey and handed it to me. And I was going, okay, what do you do here? The teeth have just been in that cup.
And what did you do?
I did the right thing. Took one for the team.
Only on this podcast will you hear one of the great auctioneers of our time talking about himself and another man's teeth.
Yeah.
So you're sauntering around north of England. Then when does it get really interesting?
I lose my job.
Why?
1990 hits. And
okay, that's post-Thatcher, is that right?
Well, 1990 is a worldwide correction where literally the Japanese who had been supporting the art market, and you hear stories about, people buying art and being buried with it, and the price of real estate in Japan, in Tokyo being worth more than California and all that. I mean, it was crazy times. The auction business was crazy. But the economy went into recession in 1990, and literally most people I know lost their jobs. I mean, it was bad in Ireland in the 80s, but it wasn't bad in the UK, the 90s.
It was rocket in the UK, because that was Mrs. Thatcher's glory years, wasn't that it?
Yeah, it was.
It was the bish bosh, the big bang, all that.
It was, but it's still, 1990s hit the world, and in the US, it was devastation. So I had applied for a Donnelly visa, and I hadn't taken it up, and I was called in to my employer in England at the time, and he offered me a post in another location. So he was saying, we need to close the office where you are. We're just not doing enough business throughout the group, but we can send you over to Cheshire. And I was like, you know what, I've got a Donnelly visa, and I hadn't taken it up, and I had literally missed the opportunity to take it up. They had I'd applied, I'd got it, I hadn't taken it up, and they were closing on December 31st, and I was due to go to a wedding in January. Anyway, we got to the airport, and they were like, this doesn't work anymore.
Uh-oh.
But I don't know what happened anyway, but when I went to America for this wedding in first week of January, they told me that I was the last Donnelly person through. So I got into the States on a Donnelly visa. Do you remember when everybody was applying and their mothers as well?
Well remembered, yeah.
Yeah. So I was the last Donnelly through.
And so you land in New York, or where?
So I'm applying for jobs, getting nowhere, and, you know, just sending out letters to auction houses. And what I've managed to do is, you don't feel too bad for me because I go to this wedding and then I go skiing in Colorado with my family. And then they leave me and they say bye-bye. And I'm in New York and I have some cousins in Boston. And so I just start on the East Coast and I decide to try to get a job. And I remember being out on I can't remember the name of the peninsula, out past Boston, Cape. And I'm out there interviewing for a job. And I'm in a phone box because back then, you know, you had phone boxes and you had phones and you had an AT&T card that you had to put in a 1-800 number. For your young listeners, they won't know what the hell we're talking about. But it was so cold that when I got off the phone, trying to call one of the auction houses to say that I'd arrived in the town, my phone had stuck to my ear with frost. So I had to peel. It was so cold in the box that I had to peel the phone off my ear. And I had frostbite. Yeah. So that was my entry too.
But
I ended up getting a job.
That's the important part. Cost you an ear, an arm and a leg,
cost me an ear, yeah. So I ended up interviewing with lots of auction houses and I got a job in Chicago with this auction house. But I had been interviewing at Christie's. Again, they'd let a load of staff go in this recession of 1990. I get there in January of 91. This is now February of 91. And I start with this auction house in Chicago. And a week later, I get a call from Christie's in New York to say, we have found a place for you. And I said, well, I've already started. And they were like, well, we've got a place for you. So I had to think really hard. What do I do? Do I honor this job that I've taken here in Chicago, or do I head off to the bright lights in the big city?
What tipped you over? You went to Christie's, right?
I did.
And what tipped you over?
Christie's.
Yeah, big name.
You know, New York, Christie's. Yeah. And you know what? She understood the auctioneer who I was working for, as in, not that it turned out that she actually knew my family, and they didn't, you know, nobody could remember. Oh yeah, we did meet her, and I'm like, I'm going to America looking for a job, and I'm looking for every opportunity. So it turned out that they had met her before, and so she was understanding, and we became good friends, and we're still good friends.
Well, let us just take a quick break at this time because I want to hear all about Christie's and that slow climb up the greasy pole. Maxall, a family-owned business since 1920, launched Homegrown at Maxall to support local growing businesses by distributing their product across the Maxall network in the Republic of Ireland. In partnership with Champion Green, Maxall invites local SMEs and startups in the food and drink sector to enter Year 2 of the Homegrown at Maxall programme. Listen back to previous winners on episode 153 of That Great Business Show, and for more details, see maxall.ie/homegrown.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com.
That Great Business Show. Winner, highly commended award. Irish Podcast Awards.
And I'm here with Paddy Meade, super auctioneer with an incredible backstory. And we're just going to launch now into New York, Christie's. First day at Christie's, Paddy.
First day at Christie's. So my first job is, you know, it's not glamorous. I'm on the front desk. So basically when you come up and you want to buy a catalogue, you want directions to the toilets, you know, I'm late for the auction, which room is it on? We had about 4 or 5 different auction rooms. So I'm on Park Avenue in what was the Delmonico in the mid-50s. And I'm working with, the person on my left is Ross Perot's daughter. Do you remember Ross Perot, who ran for, and on my right is heiress to a tire or car fortune, you know. So it's a Tony group of people, and I'm living out in Sunnyside in Queens. And I start there, and they're like, hey, Paddy this, Paddy that. And I'm like, it's actually, I say I can't be called Paddy here because it's going to be Paddy. I'm going to be Paddy LaBelle or Paddy LaBeau, so I'm Patrick. So I revert back to Patrick. And this woman calls up and she goes, I'm late for the photography auction. Can you tell me all the lots by Ansel Adams? And I say, oh, yes, we have Ansel Adams. We've got this lovely view of the sunrise over Yosemite Park. Okay. And she goes, okay, what's the next lot? I go, sunrise at El Capitan in Yosemite Park. And she goes, okay, anymore? And I go, yes, there's this, the Floor of the Valley on Yosemite by Ansel Adams. She goes, you English guys always get it wrong. It's Yosemite. And I go, well, you Americans always get it wrong. I'm Irish. And she goes, touche. And the people beside me say, you say you can't say that. You can't say that to a client on the phone. The client is always right. I said, yeah, sorry. So it was a learning experience. And but shortly after I was there, they did a thing called auction school. And what they used to do at Christie's was every year they would have a very tough and rigid auction program where they would allow or train 1 or 2 auctioneers to get through to become auctioneers. And they needed them for all the auctions that they had in their locations in New York, but they also needed charity auctioneers to go around the country because we would be getting asked the whole time. So it was very rigid because they did the auctions in code. So you had to learn a code off. So you've got the reserves and the minimums, and we can explain all that as we go through about the auction process. But we have the lot description. So you need to be able to, if you're doing a wine sale, you have to be able to say Du Cru Bocaillou and Trockenburn Auslese, and you can't be butchering your descriptions. You need to
no Yosemites.
No Yosemites. You need to be able to know your French furniture and your Louis XV from your Louis XIV and your et cetera, et cetera. So you need to be able to, if you're doing a Chinese sale, you need to be able to pronounce phonetically and you need to be able to underline. So it's a lot of work. Yeah. And so they put you through
a lot of work. How much work would it have taken you?
Well, first of all, you have to get through the auction school. So that's one where they have people trained to, again, to see whether you have an ability to engage with people. B, whether you're going to get tripped up on the numbers and when you're going to kind of butcher the code, which is the Christie's code. This is just Christie's now. They had a code which had been there since time immemorial, since James Christie started the auction house.
Now, when you say code, is this a code to hide the amount of money being bid for?
No, it's so that if anybody were to get access to the auctioneer's book, that they wouldn't be able to work it out.
Okay, and by the auctioneer's book, these are bids already left with the auctioneer, is that it?
Well, it changed over the years, but like many places, the tradition remains. So yes, traditionally the book would have everything in it. It would have the reserves or minimums that the clients wanted on their lots, and they would have the bids that the people who couldn't attend would have. Because obviously you can attend an auction and bid. But as time went by, then the clerk would execute the bids, and then you'd have people who would phone bid, in-person bid, and obviously now they do it through online as well. But back in the day, you would have a lot of bids that would be left or commission bids, and you'd have to execute those. And, not to get into the complexities of this, but you could have a reserve of 10,000, a bid of 11,000, and a bid of 11,500. And, so you had to know the minute you started where you were going to land. And if somebody in the room bid one more than that, to make sure all your bids were out. But if you have a reserve of 10 and a bid of 11 and a bid of 13, if you take the bid at 12 because you want to get it for the cheapest price you can, if somebody in the room shouts 13, well, you've got a bid of 13. You have to make sure that you are what's called right-footed. And so right-footed as opposed to left-footed. Right-footed is making sure that when you start that auction that you are protecting the reserve for the client, and if you have bids, that you are making sure that you get it at the cheapest price you can for the person who's left your bid. Because, the thing about auction houses is they are left with a huge amount of discretion. I've had items estimated at 50,000 where they've left a 500,000 bid for me to execute. And I'm the auctioneer as well. That's an awful lot of trust.
That is a lot of trust. And it's also a lot of moving parts, all the gears moving at the same time.
Yeah. And then in Christie's, you have to do it in code. So you can't look down and see 10,000. You see DJ XX, blah, blah, blah. And you have to learn your code off.
So how long did that take?
Well, with practice. First of all, you had to get through the auction school.
The school, which is how long?
Well, the school is a sort of 2 days where they take you through and you're asked to kind of plan, literally stand in front of the mirror at night beforehand for weeks leading up to this because you're applying. So everybody can attend the initial school and then they whittle it down to 4 and then they whittle it down to 2 and then 2 get through. So I got through that year. Yeah. So the first year, while I was still on the front desk, I got through the auction school, which meant they said, okay, we probably can't have him on the front desk. We need to put him into the management program. And so what they did at Christie's was they moved me around the different departments. And so I got to be with different disciplines and subspecialties Christie's and many of the auction houses are like mini companies within a company. The sculpture department and the furniture department and the contemporary art department, there's all of these different departments are microcosms which kind of work in different ways with different clients, and their job is to get property for sale and to sell it.
I watch a lot of car auctions on TV because that's one of my little pleasures. Yeah. And I notice that the Americans seem to love a good British accent selling them expensive cars. Yeah. Is that part of the game?
For car auctions, there have always been British auctioneers selling in America.
Why?
Yeah. I think because, that whole petrol head, there's just, I work, Bonhams were one of the biggest sellers, are one of the biggest sellers of cars. And there's just a cachet to it. It has a bit of theatre and panache and
was that lad Paddy Meade, was he allowed to sell cars?
I did car sales. I didn't do the...
And did you put on the posh accent?
No, I didn't put it. I just sold. I mean,
but if you watch those, I can't even remember the guy. I watch them frequently now, and they always have a very young, posh English guy, awfully going to take $500,000. You didn't do any of that stuff.
No, well, I think a lot of the auctioneers, the British auctioneers in America, aren't trying to be posh. They're
maybe they were made that way. I'm not saying
no, because my colleagues were mostly British, who were the auctioneers from Bonhams, and they didn't sound plummy.
Okay.
To me anyway, to maybe to Americans they did, but I don't think so. But there is a theatre to auction.
And describe that, and how did you develop your theatre?
Well, we used to have training. We had a member of RADA who trained us on sort of breathing techniques and diaphragm and how to be able to speak for hours and be able to speak and project. But it's also it's the hands. And, I would do things like I would take a bid from left to right and I'd cross over, and he'd say, no, you can't put your hand across the microphone. You need to make sure that you gesture openly, and it's about drawing people in and playing people off against each other in a very subtle way. And I remember, the last big lot I ever sold was this amazing piece by this artist called Fujita. And he's a fascinating story. I'll tell you about it. But what I loved about that was, as we were going up the millions, was I had one client in China and one in Taiwan. And, it's with the Chinese bidder on the mainland. It's against you now on the mainland. It's in Taiwan. It's with the Taiwanese bidder, sorry. I mean, that's, but, in a way, it can be no different with, it's with the West Coast, or it's against you in New York, it's with the LA bidder.
And to tell my cynical self or my skeptical self, you probably have favourites, or were you ever told John Smith should win this?
God, no.
No?
No, it's the highest bidder. Absolutely, no.
Yeah, but
literally auction houses are only as good as the integrity. And, you never know who's going to buy. I often know who's going to buy because, some of the sales that we'll talk about later about, a lot of the Hollywood memorabilia that I've sold and a lot of the movie props and things over the years, there's 3 players and they're all billionaires, and it's going to be one of them unless somebody comes out of left field. And they sometimes do, but, you're fretting before that sale to see is X, Y, and Z on the phone.
And go back to your Hollywood memorabilia and you're trying to flog, do you get on the phone to the 3 aforementioned billionaires and say, listen, there's some lovely lots here? Or is it just left to them to say, oh, I wonder what's selling at Bonhams this week? Or
they kind of know. We do a lot of publicity. So invariably, you're not dealing directly with these people anyway. You're dealing with their curators. And most of them don't really want to interact. And if they do, they will. And so invariably, you will, so when I'm not auctioneering, I'm phone bidding usually. So you have a bank of phone bidders. And, if you're a senior auctioneer, they'll usually put you on with this senior. There is a sort of a pecking order to who does the bidding with whom. So when people are wanting to set up a phone bid, if you're a senior member of staff, you'll get one of the sort of wealthier potential bidders. And so I've got on the phone expecting to get the curator, and I've actually got the billionaire.
Okay.
And then you're having a chat, and they'll, depending on the mood they're in, you could have quite a long conversation with them.
Yeah, but it could also be very short because they might get very angry if they don't win. Any of that stuff?
I've had lots of trouble, but I think one of the biggest issues I ever had was, well, I was actually the auctioneer in this case, but I had sold a piece of Hollywood memorabilia for $3 million. So I can't tell you what it is because then you'd probably work out. Well, anyway, I'll tell you what it was. It was the Maltese Falcon from the movie. Okay. And it was famous because it had fallen during the movie and it actually hit Bogart's toe and it was dropped by his assistant in the movie. It's taking it to him. And obviously it's housing these, I can't remember the movie where it's microfiches or jewels. But anyway, it had a sort of a bent wing. And so, there was a number of Maltese Falcons, but this one, so we sold that for $3 million, but the person who bought it wanted it delivered to him. And the place where we were due to deliver it, Bonham's, had what's called Nexus, which means we had an office. And the other auction houses didn't. But because we had an office there, it meant that we'd have to charge sales tax. So this guy was going to get a $700,000 bill for sales tax.
Oh, dear.
And he was like, hell, I'm not paying that. And we're like, well, so
$700,000.
Do you have any residence elsewhere? He said, yeah. And he's deliver it to my plane. I said, we can't deliver these to planes. So anyway, we worked it out and we were able to deliver it to a bona fide address that met the criteria that wasn't in the location where he was at that time. So it all worked out. But it's, you got to be
thinking on the hoof.
You got to be thinking on the hoof, yeah.
Yeah. This is fascinating and we will continue. This is the Paddy Meade Triptych because we're going to have to take an end here, but he is coming back for 2 more episodes and more insights. And we might even find out more about how the rich really operate. But there is a final question on each one, which is, who would Paddy Meade hire in a heartbeat?
So my colleague, a guy called Malcolm Barber, is the person that I would hire. He was my colleague. He was my boss. He's still a very good friend, but I learned most of what I've learned through him, and I'd hire him back in a heartbeat if I could.
Is Malcolm in New York or in...
He's in the UK now, but he was in New York. He was in Hong Kong. He's worked all over the place. And he's best known as a car auctioneer, apropos our previous discussion.
Not talking about you, Malcolm, honestly. I know, I find it really interesting that it's part of the shtick now is that it looks like it adds a couple $100,000 to the value of being told by somebody to start bidding higher.
It's all go, let Chrissy know on thatgreatbusinessshow.com. That Great Business Show.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com.
And that is it for this episode 195 of That Great Business Show. Great business insights, inspiration, and lots of information about sales rooms. Do sign up for our email updates and we will send you your own personal copy of the podcast at thatgreatbusinessshow.com. Do share us, do like us, and do give us 5-star reviews. It does help. Advertise with us on That Great Business Show to engage with our incredible audience of entrepreneurs, businesses and investors, and of course, like me, busybodies. We record at the Dublin South Podcast Studios, where today's studio engineer is our own lovely Lee Brennan. That is, later the dynamic duo of studio manager Peter Rice and post-production engineer Neil Hornan ensure we remain the world's best-sounding business podcast. So from me, Connell O'Moran, buchas to you all, agus slán tamil.